In the quiet town of Graybridge, nestled along the winding bends of the Silver River, Emily Parker sat alone on the worn wooden bench outside the small grocery store. The late morning sun cast long shadows over the cracked pavement, but the warmth did little to soothe the chill that had settled deep in her bones. Her hands rested protectively over the soft curve of her belly, the life growing inside her, both a source of hope and a weight pressing heavily against her chest. Just days ago, everything had changed. Michael, the man she had trusted, the man who had promised to stand by her side, had vanished without a word. His absence was a silence louder than any argument, a void that left Emily stranded in the middle of a life she had imagined together, but now faced alone. The whispers from the townsfolk, the sideways glances from neighbors who once smiled, now tinged with pity or judgment, surrounded her like a cold fog. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she had never known. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Emily's small apartment above the bakery was cramped and filled with the remnants of a life half-lived. Boxes unopened, clothes folded but untouched, and the echo of an empty bed where Michael once lay. She had tried to call him, to understand why he left, but every attempt was met with silence. The landlord's notices about overdue rent piled on the kitchen table, mixing with the faded photographs of happier times. It was in this haze of uncertainty that a chance conversation shifted the course of her days. At the market, an elderly woman with a weathered face and eyes that gleamed with quiet wisdom had approached her. "You look like you could use a place to breathe," she said softly, handing Emily a folded piece of paper. "There's a cabin down by the river, old but steady. It's been empty for a while, but it's a refuge if you need one." Emily unfolded the paper, revealing a rough sketch of a path winding through the trees to a spot marked simply as the cabin. It was a place she had heard of in passing, a whispered secret among the older residents of Graybridge, a forgotten shelter nestled between the river's edge and the dense forest, rarely visited, almost erased from memory. The idea settled in Emily's mind like a fragile flame, a place to escape the suffocating walls of her apartment, the judgmental eyes of the town, and the hollow ache left by Michael's departure. But with that hope came a swirl of doubt. Could she really find peace in a place so isolated? Would the silence there be healing or only deepen her loneliness? As she traced the lines of the map, her mind drifted to the days before everything fell apart. The laughter shared over coffee, the gentle touch of Michael's hand, the plans whispered in the dark for a future just beyond reach. Each memory was a bittersweet echo, reminding her of what was lost, but also of the strength she needed to find within herself. The grocery store bell jingled, pulling Emily back to the present. She stood slowly, the weight of her pregnancy making each movement deliberate. The townspeople bustled by, caught up in their daily routines, unaware of the storm raging just beneath her calm exterior. She clutched the folded map tightly, a fragile lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. That evening, Emily returned to her apartment, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls. She spread the map on the small kitchen table, the lines and symbols suddenly alive with possibility. The cabin was a mystery, a place she had never seen but now felt inexplicably drawn to. She imagined the sound of the river, the whisper of the trees, the cool earth beneath her feet, elements that promised a refuge from the turmoil inside. Her fingers trembled slightly as she packed a small bag, a few clothes, a blanket, the worn journal she kept from her mother, and a simple wooden pendant that had belonged to her grandmother. Each item was a piece of herself she carried forward, a connection to the past that anchored her in the present. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams a tangled weave of faces, voices, and places both familiar and strange. She woke at dawn, the first light filtering through the curtains like a gentle promise. The city was still quiet, the streets empty save for the soft rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. With a deep breath, Emily stepped outside, the cool air filling her lungs and steadying her nerves. The path to the cabin was uncertain, the map a guide but not a guarantee. She moved with cautious hope, each step a small act of courage, a rebellion against the despair that threatened to consume her. The forest welcomed her like a forgotten friend, its ancient trees arching overhead to form a cathedral of green. Birdsong filled the air, a chorus of life that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. The river's silver ribbon gleamed through the foliage, its steady flow a reminder that life, like water, could find a way forward even after the harshest storms. Hours passed as Emily navigated the winding trail, the soft earth muffling her footsteps. The weight of her pregnancy was a constant reminder of the future she was fighting for, a life that deserved safety and love. Doubts surfaced. Was this cabin truly a sanctuary, or simply another place to feel abandoned? Then, just as the sun reached its zenith, she saw it. A weathered roof peeking through the branches, the outline of a small cabin nestled against the riverbank. It was smaller than she had imagined, humble and unassuming, but there was a quiet strength in its presence. The walls bore the marks of time, the wood faded and cracked, but still standing firm against the elements. Emily approached slowly, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots the only sound, breaking the stillness. She reached out, her fingers curling around the rusted iron latch of the door. The cabin smelled of earth and wood smoke, a scent that stirred something deep within her, a memory or a promise she couldn't yet name. Inside, the space was modest but welcoming. A small hearth sat cold in the corner, a threadbare rug lay on the floor, and a single window framed the river's shimmering surface. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, the air thick with silence and possibility. Emily sank onto the worn wooden floor, the weight of the moment pressing down but also lifting. Here, in this forgotten place, she found a fragile peace. The cabin was more than shelter. It was a chance to start again, to heal, and to hold on to hope when the world outside seemed determined to let it go. Clutching the map and the pendant, Emily closed her eyes and let the river's gentle murmur fill the room. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever. Belonging. The days that followed Emily's arrival at the cabin were heavy with silence, a quiet that pressed in on her from every side. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting to see what she would do with this fragile refuge. Inside, the cabin's modest walls offered shelter, but the ache of abandonment clung stubbornly to her heart. Each morning, she awoke to the soft light filtering through the single window, a gentle reminder that the world outside continued to turn, indifferent to her pain. Emily moved through the small space with cautious purpose, unpacking the few belongings she had brought and arranging them with care. The worn blanket found a place on the creaking cot, the journal resting on the splintered table beside a chipped enamel mug. She lit a fire in the hearth, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows that danced across the rough-hewn walls. The warmth was a balm against the chill that lingered, both in the air and inside her chest. But no matter how much she tried to settle, the weight of loneliness pressed down. In the town of Graybridge, whispers followed her name, carried on the dry wind through narrow streets and whispered behind closed doors. She was the girl who had been left, the woman who now carried the unborn child of a man who had disappeared without a word. Some looked away in sympathy, others with thinly veiled judgment. Emily felt their eyes like 1,000 tiny pricks, each one a reminder that she was alone in this fight. The grocery store clerk avoided her gaze when she came in for bread and milk. At the post office, old Mrs. Harlan's smile faltered, replaced by a tight nod. Even the children who once waved at her from their yards now crossed the street to avoid passing too close. The isolation Emily had fled only seemed to follow her, wrapping itself tighter with each passing day. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the sky blushed with hues of pink and orange, Emily sat on the cabin's creaky porch, her hands resting on the swell of her belly. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. She traced the lines of the map her hand had never fully let go. The rough paper folded and refolded so many times that its edges were soft and worn. The cabin was her sanctuary, but the world around her felt like a storm she couldn't outrun. Tears came without warning, slipping down her cheeks as she whispered the name she still held close to her heart. Michael. The man who had promised love, who had promised family, had left her to face this uncertain future alone. The betrayal cut deep, sharper than any wound she'd known, and the pang of it echoed in every hollow moment. Yet beneath the sorrow, a quiet strength began to stir. Emily knew that her unborn child depended on her, that the life growing inside was a fragile thread she had to protect. The fear of being alone was real, but it was outweighed by a fierce determination to survive, to find peace even when the world seemed determined to deny it. That evening, as dusk settled and the forest whispered its ancient songs, Emily made a decision. She would not allow herself to be swallowed by despair. She would face the judgment, the loneliness, and the uncertainty head-on. The cabin was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of her resolve, a place where she could gather the fragments of her life and begin to heal. But the path ahead was not without obstacles. News from Graybridge trickled in on the breeze, carried by passing travelers, and the occasional letter slipped under the cabin door. Some messages were kind, offering words of encouragement and small tokens of support, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, a hand-knitted scarf. Others were less gentle, thinly veiled warnings to leave the town's outskirts and return to a life where she belonged. One afternoon, a knock at the door startled Emily. She hesitated, heart pounding, before opening it to find Mrs. Harlan standing on the threshold, a basket cradled in her arms. The elderly woman's eyes were soft, filled with a mix of sorrow and quiet resolve. "I thought you might like some fresh eggs," she said, her voice gentle. "And perhaps some company. It's not easy living alone out here." Emily smiled, a flicker of gratitude warming her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, stepping aside to let Mrs. Harlan in. The old woman settled onto a rickety chair, and for a while they simply sat in companionable silence, the crackling fire bridging the gap between two worlds. But even as kindness found its way through the cracks, the emotional turmoil beneath Emily's calm exterior churned relentlessly. The nights were the hardest, when the silence grew loud and the shadows lengthened. Sleep was elusive, and when it came, it was haunted by dreams of loss and abandonment. She found herself reliving the moment Michael left. The slammed door, the empty hallway, the hollow echo of promises broken. Each memory was a fresh wound, but also a reminder of the life she was determined to protect. She reached for her journal, its pages filling with words penned in shaky script, letters to the child she would soon meet, confessions of fear and hope, and fragments of strength she was only beginning to understand. Days blurred into weeks, and Emily's belly swelled with the life she carried. The loneliness remained, but it was tempered by moments of quiet joy. A bird's song at dawn, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, the taste of fresh bread brought by Mrs. Harlan. She learned to find comfort in small rituals, lighting the fire each morning, tending to the garden patch she had started near the cabin, and reading aloud to the invisible child within her. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The quiet town began to murmur about the woman who lived alone by the river, her presence stirring a mix of curiosity and unease. Some whispered that she was reckless, others that she was a symbol of something the town preferred to forget. Emily felt the weight of their suspicion like a tangible force, a barrier that made each day harder to bear. One afternoon, as she gathered wildflowers by the riverbank, a group of men from the town passed by, their laughter sharp and edged with mockery. Emily's heart clenched, but she held her ground, meeting their gazes with quiet defiance. The child inside her was a promise of something better, a future she would fight to claim, no matter the cost. That night, as the fire flickered low and the forest settled into darkness, Emily sat by the window, tracing the river's silver path with her eyes. The cabin was her refuge, but the battle for peace was far from over. The judgment, the loneliness, and the uncertainty remained constant companions, but so did a growing determination. She was no longer just a woman left behind. She was a mother-to-be, a guardian of hope, and a quiet force rising from the shadows. The journey ahead was daunting, but Emily knew she would face it with the fierce resilience that had carried her this far. The cabin by the river was her sanctuary, but it was also the beginning of something new, a chance to reclaim her life and build a future on her own terms. The morning air was crisp as Emily packed the last of her belongings into a worn canvas bag, the soft rustle of leaves and distant bird calls mingling with the steady pulse of her heartbeat. The cabin, which had become her sanctuary over the past weeks, now felt both a refuge and a threshold, a place she would return to, but one she needed to leave for a time. The small map her grandmother's friend had given her lay folded in the pocket, a reminder of the path ahead. Outside, the silver river glistened under the early sun, its waters murmuring secrets as they wound through the forest. Emily paused at the cabin's threshold, her hand resting on the weathered doorframe. The familiar scent of pine and earth seeped into her senses, grounding her even as uncertainty stirred within. This journey was a necessary step, a venture into the unknown that promised more than just shelter. It was a step toward healing. She set off along the dirt trail that led away from the cabin, the soft earth cushioning her footsteps. Each movement was deliberate, a small triumph over the fear and doubt that had shadowed her since Michael's disappearance. The path was tangled with roots and overgrown branches, but Emily navigated it with growing confidence. The way marked by the faint lines sketched on her map and the stories whispered by the wind. As she walked, memories floated through her mind like drifting leaves. She recalled the laughter that had once filled her small apartment in Graybridge, the warm evenings spent dreaming of a future with Michael, and the sudden, searing silence that followed his departure. Those memories were bittersweet, but they fueled a determination that had settled deep in her bones. She was no longer just a woman running from heartbreak. She was a mother protecting the life inside her, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The forest seemed to embrace her, its towering trees forming a protective canopy overhead. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, in dappled patterns, casting shifting shadows that danced with the rhythm of her steps. The air was rich with the scent of damp moss and wildflowers, and the distant call of a hawk echoed through the trees like a herald of change. At one point, Emily paused by a small clearing where the river widened, the water's surface shimmering like liquid glass. She knelt on the soft grass, dipping her fingers into the cool current. The sensation was grounding, a reminder that life continued despite the storms within her. The river's steady flow whispered promises of renewal and resilience, and she let the sound wash over her, filling the hollow spaces left by loss. As she resumed her journey, the path grew steeper, winding upward through rocky terrain and dense underbrush. The physical exertion was welcome, a distraction from the swirling thoughts that threatened to overwhelm her. She focused on each step, the rhythm of her breath, and the steady beat of her own heart, a reminder that she was still here, still fighting. Along the way, Emily found herself reflecting on the women who had walked similar paths before her. Her grandmother's stories, shared in quiet moments by the fireside, came to mind. Tales of strength, endurance, and the unyielding spirit passed down through generations. Those women had faced hardship and loss, yet they had carved out spaces of hope and resilience. Emily felt their presence with her now, a silent chorus urging her forward. The afternoon sun climbed higher as she neared the edge of the forest, where the trees gave way to a narrow dirt road leading toward the town of Graybridge. The sound of distant voices and the occasional rumble of a passing truck mingled with the rustling leaves. Emily hesitated, the familiar sights and sounds stirring a mix of apprehension and resolve. She thought of the faces she had left behind, the wary glances, the whispered judgments, and the few kind souls who had offered support despite the town's quiet disapproval. Returning to Graybridge was not a step she took lightly, but it was a necessary one. There were things to be arranged, questions to be answered, and a life to rebuild beyond the walls of the cabin. As she walked down the road, Emily's thoughts turned to the practicalities that awaited her. Securing a place to live when she returned, arranging prenatal care, and perhaps, most daunting of all, facing the people who had turned away when she needed them most. The weight of these challenges pressed on her, but beneath it all was a steady flame of hope, a belief that she could carve out a new life on her own terms. By late afternoon, Emily reached the edge of town, where the familiar storefronts and weathered wooden signs came into view. The scent of fresh bread from the bakery mingled with the faint aroma of diesel and pine. She paused briefly at the corner, gathering her courage before stepping onto the cracked sidewalk. The streets were quieter than she remembered, the usual bustle tempered by the slow rhythms of a small town settling into evening. A few passers-by glanced her way, their expressions guarded but not unkind. Emily nodded politely, a simple gesture that felt like a bridge between her solitude and the community she had left behind. Her first stop was the small clinic nestled between the post office and the general store. The building's faded white paint and creaking sign bore witness to years of steady service. Inside, the nurse greeted her with a warm smile, though her eyes held a flicker of concern. "I'm here to arrange prenatal care," Emily said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves. "I just moved back to town." The nurse nodded, pulling out a folder and guiding Emily through the necessary steps. The conversation was practical, grounded in the present, but beneath it lay the unspoken stories of many women who had walked this path. Stories of uncertainty, courage, and the quiet hope that each new life carried. After the clinic, Emily made her way to the town hall where she sought information about housing assistance. The clerk behind the counter was efficient and kind, offering pamphlets and contact numbers. Emily filled out forms with careful attention, each signature a small act of reclaiming control over her life. As dusk settled, she found herself drawn to the river once more, its silver surface reflecting the fading light like a mirror. She stood at the water's edge, the cool breeze teasing loose strands of hair across her face. The river's steady murmur was a balm, a reminder that even in times of hardship, life continued to flow forward. Emily closed her eyes, letting the sounds and sensations wash over her. The journey to the cabin had been more than a physical trek. It had been a passage through grief, fear, and hope. The path ahead remained uncertain, but she felt a growing strength within, a quiet assurance that she could face whatever came next. With the map safely tucked away and the steady rhythm of the river in her ears, Emily turned back toward the town, ready to navigate the challenges waiting beyond the forest's edge. Each step was a testament to her resilience, a declaration that she would not be defined by abandonment, but by the courage to start anew. The path back to the cabin felt different this time, less like a journey into the unknown and more like a return to a place that had begun to root itself within her. As Emily stepped through the thinning trees, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth wrapped around her like an old, comforting shawl. The sun filtered through the canopy in soft beams, casting a warm glow over the forest floor dotted with wildflowers and moss. The air was alive with the gentle hum of insects and the distant trill of bird song, a natural symphony that seemed to welcome her home. The cabin came into view, nestled beside the silver river, its weathered timbers bathed in the golden afternoon light. Though smaller than she had imagined when first hearing of it, the structure stood with quiet dignity, a steadfast guardian against the passage of time. The roof sagged slightly in one corner, and the paint had long since faded. But there was a warmth in its imperfections, a story etched into every knot and crack. Emily hesitated just beyond the threshold, her hand lingering on the rusted iron latch. The cabin looked unchanged, yet she felt that she had shifted in the weeks away, carrying the weight of the town's cautious acceptance and the plans she'd made for the days ahead. As she pushed the door open, a soft creak echoed through the small space, and the scent of old wood and wildflowers greeted her like a whispered promise. Inside, the cabin was modest, but alive with possibility. The single window framed a view of the river's shimmering surface, where sunlight danced on the gentle ripples. Dust motes floated lazily in the golden light, and the hearth, though cold, stood ready to cradle a fire that would bring warmth on cooler nights. The threadbare rug on the floor and the worn wooden table bore the marks of time, but also of care, as if the cabin itself had been waiting patiently for her return. Emily set down her bag and took a slow, deliberate walk through the space, running her fingers along the rough-hewn walls. The silence here was different from the oppressive quiet of the town. It was a living, breathing stillness, filled with the whispers of the forest and the steady murmur of the river. She felt it settle around her, a shield against the world outside. As she settled onto the cot, the familiar swell of her belly reminding her of the life she carried, Emily reached for the journal she kept tucked in her bag. The pages were filled with sketches, thoughts, and hopes, fragments of a story she was beginning to weave for herself and her unborn child. Her fingers traced the worn leather cover, and she opened it to a blank page, the promise of new beginnings waiting to be written. The hours passed quietly as Emily began to unpack the few belongings she had brought back, arranging them with care on the small shelves and hooks she had fashioned from fallen branches. A kettle was set on the hearth, and soon the soft hiss of boiling water filled the room, mingling with the scent of freshly brewed tea. The simple act of tending to the cabin, of creating a home within its walls, brought a sense of peace she had not known in months. Outside, the river flowed steady and sure, its gentle rush a constant companion. Emily stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking softly beneath her feet. She watched as the sunlight sparkled on the water, 1,000 tiny diamonds scattered across the surface. The forest around her seemed to lean in closer, the branches swaying gently in the breeze as if offering their quiet support. But even as comfort seeped into the cabin's corners, Emily could not ignore the shadows that lingered beyond the trees. The town, with its cautious glances and whispered judgments, still loomed in the distance. She knew that returning here would bring challenges, questions about her presence, doubts about her future, and perhaps even resistance from those who viewed her as an outsider. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and rose, Emily sat by the window, a soft shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The journal lay open on her lap, and she wrote slowly, the scratch of pen on the paper a steady companion to the river's song. She wrote of hope and fear, of dreams and doubts, tracing the contours of a life that was hers to shape. Her thoughts drifted to the moments of kindness she had encountered, the gentle smile from Mrs. Harlan, the quiet support of the nurse at the clinic, and the unexpected warmth from a few townsfolk who had dared to reach out. Those small gestures were like seeds planted in rocky soil, fragile but full of promise. As darkness deepened, Emily lit a candle, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. The cabin felt alive in the soft glow, a sanctuary carved from the wilderness and stitched together with resilience. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to simply be, amidst the quiet strength of this place. Later, as she lay in the cot, the steady rhythm of her own breathing mingled with the distant call of an owl. The river's murmur lulled her into a restless sleep, dreams weaving through her mind like threads of light and shadow. She dreamed of a future where the cabin was not just a shelter, but a home filled with laughter and love, where the child she carried would grow surrounded by the enduring beauty of the forest and the river. Morning came softly, the first light spilling through the window in gentle golds and pinks. Emily rose with a sense of calm determination, the cabin's quiet embrace renewing her spirit. She stepped outside to breathe in the crisp air, the forest alive with the stirrings of a new day. The river flowed endlessly beside her, a reminder that life, in its relentless way, carried forward. As she prepared a simple breakfast over the hearth, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the heartbreak, the solitude, and the small victories that had shaped her path. The cabin was more than a building. It was a testament to survival, a beacon of hope forged from the ruins of loss. With each passing day, Emily felt herself growing stronger, the cabin's walls bearing witness to her quiet transformation. The mysteries of the place, the stories hidden in its worn floorboards, the secrets whispered by the river, began to unfold, inviting her deeper into a world where healing was possible. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. The judgments of the town lingered like shadows at the edge of the forest, and the unknown stretched wide before her. Yet here, in the heart of the wilderness, Emily found a fragile peace. The cabin stood steadfast, a silent promise that no matter what storms came, she was not alone. The river's song carried on through the trees, a melody of endurance and grace. And as Emily gazed across the water, she understood that this place, the cabin, the forest, the river, was the beginning of a new chapter. One not defined by loss, but by the quiet strength of a woman who dared to hope, to heal, and to rebuild. The cabin's quiet comfort belied the layers of mystery it held within its walls, secrets etched into every creak and shadow. One afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the window and danced upon the worn floorboards, Emily set about exploring the space more thoroughly, her curiosity piqued by the subtle signs of life left behind. She began with a small wooden chest tucked beneath the cot, its surface scarred and faded from years of use. The lid resisted at first, groaning softly before yielding to her careful touch. Inside, folded linens lay atop a collection of faded photographs and brittle letters tied with a frayed ribbon. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted a black and white image of a woman standing by the river, her eyes steady and resolute despite the passage of time. The name, Margaret, was scrawled in delicate script on the back. Intrigued, Emily sifted through the letters, their yellowed pages revealing glimpses of a life intertwined with the cabin's history. One letter spoke of hardship and hope, penned by Margaret to a sister miles away, describing the shelter the cabin had offered during a winter of relentless storms. Another was a journal entry, hastily written but rich with emotion, recounting the quiet strength found in solitude and the solace of the river's endless flow. The discovery stirred something deep within Emily, a kinship with a woman who had faced her own trials long before she arrived. These fragments of the past were not mere relics. They were echoes of resilience, whispers of a legacy she was now a part of. Driven by a newfound determination, Emily searched the cabin more thoroughly, uncovering hidden compartments cleverly concealed beneath floorboards and behind loose panels. Each revealed small treasures: a carved wooden pendant, a bundle of dried wildflowers, a worn leather-bound book filled with pressed leaves and hand-drawn sketches of the local flora and fauna. It was as if Margaret had left a map, not only of the land, but of the spirit needed to endure within it. One such compartment held an old, weathered journal, its pages brittle but intact. Emily brushed off the dust and settled by the window to read, the river's gentle murmur providing a soothing backdrop. The journal belonged to Margaret herself, chronicling days of quiet hardship and moments of unexpected joy. She wrote of nights spent listening to the wind's song through the cracks in the cabin walls, of mornings warmed by the sun's gentle touch, and of the unspoken bond forged with the river that never ceased to flow. Emily found solace in Margaret's words, the honesty and vulnerability bridging the gap between their lives. Here was a woman who had stood where Emily now stood, who had wrestled with fear and loss, but had found strength in the very earth beneath her feet. The journal spoke of a lineage of women connected not just by blood, but by the unyielding spirit that the cabin seemed to nurture. As she read, Emily felt the cabin breathe around her, alive with the stories embedded in its walls. The past and present intertwined, creating a tapestry of resilience and hope. The secrets it held were not merely personal histories, but gifts. Lessons passed down through time, waiting for someone willing to listen. Days turned into weeks as Emily delved deeper into the cabin's mysteries. She began to catalog her findings in her own journal, adding sketches and notes alongside Margaret's entries. The act of discovery became a ritual, a way to anchor herself and connect with the generations that had come before. Each hidden space she uncovered felt like a message, a reminder that she was not alone in her journey. The garden patch near the cabin flourished under her care, wildflowers blooming in vibrant colors, their petals reaching toward the sun as if in silent celebration. Emily often paused there, hands stained with earth, heart swelling with the quiet joy of creation. The cabin and its surroundings were no longer just a refuge. They were a living testament to survival and renewal. One afternoon, while exploring a narrow crawlspace behind the hearth, Emily stumbled upon a faded, hand-drawn map tucked inside a folded piece of parchment. The map detailed the surrounding forest. Trails, marking places of significance with delicate symbols. A grove where rare herbs grew. A hidden spring with crystal-clear water. And a stone circle that bore the marks of ancient gatherings. The annotations, written in Margaret's familiar handwriting, hinted at rituals and traditions that had sustained the cabin's occupants through generations. The discovery added another layer to Emily's understanding of the cabin. It was more than a simple shelter. It was a sanctuary infused with history, culture, and a deep connection to the land. The forest was not just backdrop, but participant in the story, a living entity that offered protection and guidance. Emily felt a profound sense of belonging as she traced the map with her fingertips, imagining the footsteps that had once wandered these paths. The cabin had been a refuge for women like Margaret, women who had faced trials yet found strength in solitude and the embrace of nature. Now, it was her turn to carry that legacy forward. As evening fell, Emily sat by the hearth with both journals open before her, the flickering firelight dancing across the pages. She wrote slowly, her words weaving past and present into a tapestry of hope and resilience. The cabin's secrets were no longer hidden. They were alive within her, guiding her through the uncertainty of her own story. Outside, the river continued its endless journey, a silver ribbon of life threading through the forest. Emily listened to its steady murmur, drawing strength from its constancy. The cabin, with all its hidden spaces and whispered histories, had become more than a shelter. It was a home where the past and future met, where a woman's spirit could grow despite the storms she had weathered. In the quiet of the night, Emily closed the journals and looked out the window at the stars beginning to pierce the darkening sky. The cabin stood silent but strong, a beacon of endurance and hope. She felt a deep gratitude for the woman who had come before, for the stories left behind, and for the chance to add her own chapter to the unfolding legacy. With a heart steadied by connection and purpose, Emily prepared to face the days ahead, carrying the cabin's secrets and gifts close to her soul. The journey was far from over, but here, in this small wooden shelter beside the river, she had found a foundation on which to build a future, one marked by strength, survival, and the quiet power of a legacy passed down through generations of women. The stories Emily uncovered within the cabin's walls began to weave themselves into the fabric of her own life. Each page of Margaret's journal a thread connecting past and present. As days turned into weeks, Emily found herself drawn not only to the physical remnants, but to the deeper history of the town and the river that had cradled generations before her. The cabin was no longer an isolated refuge, but a portal to a legacy of resilience and quiet strength. One afternoon, she sat by the riverbank, the journal resting on her knees as she turned the fragile pages with reverence. The entries spoke of a woman who had once stood where Emily now sat, a woman who faced hardship, yet found solace in the embrace of the forest and the steady flow of the Silver River. Margaret's words painted vivid images of the town's history, of fires that had reshaped its streets, of winters that had tested the resolve of its people, and of a community bound by both hardship and hope. Emily's mind wandered to the stories she had heard from the older residents of Greybridge, fragments of tales passed down through whispered conversations and weathered photographs. She recalled the day Mrs. Harlan had spoken softly of a time when the river had flooded, sweeping away homes but sparing the cabin nestled among the trees. It was said that the women of the town had gathered there, seeking refuge and strength during the darkest hours. Inspired, Emily began to piece together the threads of this shared history, her journal filling with notes and sketches that bridged the past to her present. She imagined the women who had come before, mothers, daughters, sisters, who had faced their own storms yet had found a way to endure. Their stories were etched not only in faded letters and old maps, but in the very soil beneath her feet and the whispered songs carried by the wind. This connection to a lineage of resilient women kindled a flicker of hope within Emily. She felt less like an outsider and more like a continuation of a story that had been unfolding long before her arrival. The cabin, once a mere shelter, had become a symbol of survival and strength, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who had called this place home. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of amber and rose, Emily sat by the hearth, the journal open before her. She traced the delicate script of Margaret's entries, her own pen poised to add new words, a dialogue across time. The quiet crackle of the fire mingled with the distant call of an owl, creating a rhythm that felt both ancient and alive. Emily's thoughts drifted to the future she hoped to build for her child, a future rooted in the lessons of the past. She wrote of courage found in solitude, of hope nurtured by nature, and of the unspoken bonds that linked generations of women through shared experience. The act of writing became a way to claim her place in this lineage, to honor the women who had come before, and to prepare for the challenges yet to come. As days passed, Emily noticed a subtle shift within herself. The fear and uncertainty that had once threatened to overwhelm her were tempered by a growing sense of purpose. The cabin's history was no longer just a story to be uncovered. It was a source of strength, a wellspring of resilience she could draw upon when the nights grew long and the shadows deep. Her connection to the town's history deepened as well. She sought out conversations with elders in Greybridge, listening to their memories and collecting fragments of forgotten tales. They spoke of women who had defied expectations, who had tended to the land and cared for their families in the face of adversity. These stories resonated with Emily, weaving a tapestry of shared experience that transcended time. One afternoon, Mrs. Harlan invited Emily to her small cottage, where faded photographs and hand-stitched quilts told stories of a community bound by resilience. Over tea they shared memories and laughter, the walls filled with warmth and understanding. It was a moment of belonging that Emily cherished, a reminder that she was not alone in her journey. As autumn painted the forest in shades of gold and crimson, Emily found herself more attuned to the rhythms of the land and the legacy she carried. The cabin stood as a silent witness to her transformation, its walls echoing with the strength of generations. She tended her garden with renewed care, planting seeds that promised growth and renewal, much like the life blossoming within her. One evening, as the first chill of frost whispered through the trees, Emily sat by the river, watching the waters shimmer under a sky scattered with stars. The murmur of the current was a constant comfort, a reminder that life, like the river, moved forward despite obstacles. She felt the weight of her heritage and the promise of the future intertwine, grounding her in a profound sense of purpose. With the journal resting beside her, Emily whispered a quiet vow to honor the legacy of the women who had come before, to nurture the hope within her, and to face the unknown with courage. The cabin was no longer just a shelter from the storm. It was a beacon of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of connection and the strength found in embracing one's history. As the night deepened, Emily rose and returned to the cabin, the soft glow of the hearth welcoming her home. She lit a candle and sat down to write, her pen flowing across the pages in a steady rhythm. The stories of past and present merged, creating a tapestry of hope and survival that would carry her forward. In the quiet of the forest, surrounded by the whispers of ancestors and the song of the river, Emily found a strength she had not known before. The cabin was more than a refuge. It was a living legacy, a place where the past and future met, and where a woman could rise from the shadows to claim her own story. The tranquility Emily had found in the cabin and forest began to fray as whispers from the town crept through the trees like an unwelcome wind. It started subtly. Furtive glances from passing hikers, hushed conversations trailing off when she approached, the sudden hush of voices in the general store when her name was mentioned. The sanctuary she had built felt increasingly fragile, as if the boundary between the wild woods and the wary town was closing in on her. One morning, while tending to her small garden patch, Emily noticed a group of men gathered near the riverbank, their voices carrying faintly through the crisp air. They spoke with a mixture of curiosity and contempt, their words laced with suspicion. She caught fragments. That woman, living out here alone, doesn't belong, echoing the judgment she had tried to leave behind in Graybridge. More disquieting was the news that spread quickly. A land developer had taken an interest in the river area, eyeing it as prime real estate for a new project. The cabin, nestled among the trees and whispered about in town, was now a target. Rumors swirled that plans were underway to clear the land, to reshape the riverbank into something unrecognizable, something profitable. Emily's heart clenched at the thought. The cabin was more than a structure. It was a repository of history, a refuge for generations of women, and the cradle of her own fragile hope. The idea that it could be torn down, erased, felt like a personal wound. Determined not to be driven away, Emily reached out to Mr. Harrington, the town's lawyer who had once helped her navigate the legalities surrounding the cabin. His office was a modest space cluttered with books and papers, but his presence was steady and reassuring. "We need to understand our rights," Emily said firmly, placing the map and her journal on his desk. "The cabin belongs to me, but I don't know what protections I have against this developer." Mr. Harrington nodded, flipping through documents with practiced ease. "There are zoning laws and historical protections we can explore. It won't be easy, but there's precedent for preserving properties like yours, especially if we can demonstrate the cabin's significance." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and quiet determination. Emily found herself thrust into a world she had never anticipated. Legal battles, town council hearings, and the uneasy balance between community interests and private enterprise. The support she had quietly nurtured began to surface. A few townsfolk, moved by her story and the cabin's history, joined her cause, their voices adding weight to her plea. Yet, not all were sympathetic. At the grocery store, a man whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "She's just holding out for a handout. This land's going to progress, with or without her." The sting of isolation returned, sharper than before. One afternoon, as Emily walked the forest trail, she encountered a group of local residents gathered near the old stone bridge. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity and skepticism. A woman stepped forward, her voice steady but wary. "We've heard about your fight to keep the cabin," she said. "Some of us remember stories from our grandmothers about this place. It means more than just a building, but others see it as a barrier to progress." Emily met her gaze, feeling the weight of years of judgment and hope collide. "It's not just a building to me," she replied softly. "It's a connection to the past and a promise for the future. I want to protect it, not just for myself, but for the town and the land." The conversation marked a turning point. Slowly, pockets of support grew. Neighbors sharing stories of their own ancestors who had found solace in the forest, recalling the cabin as a symbol of endurance. These voices, once quiet, began to ripple through Graybridge, challenging the developer's plans and reminding the town of its roots. But the battle was far from over. One evening, as twilight brushed the sky with soft purples and golds, Emily received a terse letter from the developer's office, a formal notice to vacate the land within 30 days. The ultimatum was clear, and the pressure mounted. That night, Emily sat by the hearth, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the cabin walls. The weight of uncertainty pressed down, but beneath it, a fierce resolve burned bright. The cabin was a legacy, a testament to survival and hope. She could not let it be erased. In the days that followed, Emily organized meetings with her newfound allies, drafting petitions and rallying the community. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards, and conversations sparked in the town square. The fight to save the cabin became a cause that transcended her own story, a stand for heritage, nature, and the quiet strength of those often overlooked. Amid the turmoil, Emily found moments of solace walking along the riverbank, the water's steady murmur a balm to her restless spirit. The forest, with its ancient trees and whispering leaves, seemed to lend its strength, reminding her that endurance was woven into the very soil beneath her feet. One afternoon, as she gathered wildflowers near the stone circle marked on Margaret's map, a group of children from town approached cautiously. Their eyes wide with curiosity, they listened as Emily shared stories of the cabin and the women who had found refuge here. Their laughter and questions breathed new life into the place, a reminder that the cabin's future was intertwined with the next generation. The tension between preservation and progress grew palpable, but Emily stood firm, her resolve unshaken. The cabin was more than wood and stone. It was a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope nestled among the trees. With each passing day, the community's voice joined hers, a chorus rising against the tide of change. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, Emily knew one truth with unwavering clarity. She would fight to protect the cabin and the legacy it held, for herself, for her child, and for all who found strength in its shelter. The morning light filtered through the cabin's window in soft, pale beams, casting gentle patterns on the worn wooden floor as Emily prepared herself for the confrontation that loomed ahead. The weight of the past weeks, legal, battles, community meetings, whispered threats, pressed heavily on her, but beneath it all was a steady flame of determination. Today, the developer would arrive with plans in hand, ready to tear down the place she had come to cherish. And Emily knew this was the moment she had to stand her ground. The cabin, nestled among towering pines and embraced by the steady murmur of the Silver River, felt like more than just shelter now. It was a sanctuary of stories and strength, a testament to generations of women who had found refuge and resilience within its walls. As she stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled her lungs, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting alongside her. Down the winding dirt road, a small crowd had gathered, a mix of townsfolk, neighbors, and those who had come to support her cause. Faces both familiar and new reflected a range of emotions: concern, curiosity, hope. Emily's heart swelled with gratitude and resolve. This was no longer just her fight. It had become a symbol of the community's connection to its past and its future. The developer's truck rumbled into view, sleek and out of place against the natural backdrop. Men stepped out carrying blueprints and cameras, their confident strides betraying an expectation of victory. They were met with a wall of quiet defiance. Emily stepped forward, her voice clear and steady as she addressed them. This cabin is not just a building. It holds the history of our town and the strength of the women who lived here. It is a refuge, a sanctuary, and a symbol. We will not let it be erased. A murmur ran through the crowd, a mixture of agreement and apprehension. The lead developer, a man with sharp eyes and a practiced smile, responded coolly. We respect history, but progress must move forward. This land is valuable and development will bring jobs and growth. The cabin is in the way of a better future for Graybridge. Emily met his gaze without flinching. Progress that destroys our heritage is no progress at all. This cabin connects us to our roots, to the stories that make this town who we are. We're not asking for much, just the chance to preserve what matters. The standoff drew in the town's mayor, who had been observing quietly. She stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "We must find a balance," she said. "I propose a community meeting to discuss how we can protect the cabin while considering the town's needs." The developer hesitated but nodded, sensing the tide of public opinion shifting. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Emily standing beside the river, the water's steady flow a comforting rhythm against the tension in her chest. In the days that followed, the community meeting became a pivotal moment. Town Hall was filled with voices, some wary, some passionate, all invested. Elders shared stories of the cabin's significance, while younger residents expressed hopes for growth and opportunity. Emily spoke, with quiet conviction, weaving the cabin's history into a tapestry of shared identity. Supporters from both sides found common ground in the desire to honor the past without halting progress. Proposals emerged, creating a protected heritage site around the cabin, incorporating green spaces into development plans, and establishing educational programs to share the town's history with future generations. Emily watched as the community rallied, the cabin becoming a symbol that transcended individual interests. Legal advisors worked alongside planners to draft protections, and Mr. Harrington's steady guidance proved invaluable in navigating the complexities. One afternoon, as Emily walked the forest trail near the cabin, she encountered a group of volunteers. They were clearing brush, planting native flowers, and repairing the cabin's weathered exterior. Their smiles and shared purpose filled her with a quiet joy. Among them was Mrs. Harlan, who handed Emily a small bouquet of wildflowers. "This place needs care," she said softly. "Just like you." The cabin, once at the brink of destruction, was beginning to breathe again with life and hope. Its walls whispered stories not only of survival, but of community, resilience, and the power of standing together. As autumn deepened and the leaves painted the forest in fiery hues, Emily found herself more rooted than ever. The legal challenges and community debates had forged bonds stronger than she had imagined possible. The cabin was safe, for now, and its future intertwined with the town's. Evenings were spent by the hearth, where Emily wrote in her journal, chronicling the journey from isolation to belonging. The firelight flickered against the wooden walls, casting shadows that danced like memories coming alive. One night, as a cool breeze rustled the leaves outside, Emily held the wooden pendant Margaret had left behind. It was a symbol of the legacy she had inherited and was now entrusted to protect. The cabin was no longer just a refuge from the past. It was a beacon for the future. The storm had not passed, but Emily stood ready, surrounded by a community awakened to the value of their shared history. The fight had been hard, but the cabin's survival was a victory not only for her, but for all who believed in preserving the stories that shaped them. As dawn broke over the Silver River, Emily stepped outside, the morning light casting a golden glow over the cabin and the forest beyond. The path ahead remained uncertain, but she faced it with a heart strengthened by connection. a spirit fortified by resilience, and a home that was hers to protect. The days grew shorter and cooler as autumn deepened around the cabin, the forest painted in fiery hues of amber, crimson, and gold. Emily moved through the woods with a newfound calmness, her hands gently resting on the swell of her belly as the life within her stirred with every step. The journey from isolation to community had been arduous, but the cabin now stood as a sanctuary not only for her, but for the legacy she was determined to protect. News had spread quietly but surely through Graybridge. The cabin was safe. The heritage protections passed by the town council, bolstered by the collective voices of neighbors and strangers alike, had turned the tide. Developers had scaled back their plans, integrating green spaces and preserving the forest's edge. The cabin, once threatened with destruction, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. But the true transformation was yet to come. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting the sky in soft shades of lavender and rose, Emily felt the first unmistakable pangs of labor. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she steadied herself against the cabin's doorway, the cool air sharp against her flushed skin. Alone, but not lonely, she reached for the small bag she had prepared weeks before. Her journal, a blanket, and the wooden pendant that had become a talisman of strength. The night deepened, the stars blinking awake in the vast sky above, as Emily moved with quiet determination toward the heart of the forest. The cabin was her refuge, but the river's gentle murmur called to her, a reminder of the enduring flow of life. She sought the place where water met earth, where generations of women had braved storms and found solace. As the labor intensified, Emily found herself surrounded by the ancient trees, their branches swaying gently in the night breeze. The forest seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, a sacred rhythm that matched the contractions tightening within her. The river's song grew louder in her ears, a soothing cadence that steadied her racing heart. Just as the moon reached its zenith, a soft sound broke the stillness, the arrival of a figure moving swiftly through the shadows. It was Mrs. Harlan, the kindly elder who had become a steadfast friend and ally. She carried a small bag of supplies and a calm presence that filled the clearing with warmth. "I'm here," she whispered, settling beside Emily with practiced ease. "You're not alone." Under the canopy of stars and the watchful gaze of the forest, Emily gave birth to a daughter, her cries mingling with the rustling leaves and the river's gentle flow. The midwife's hands were steady, her voice a comforting anchor as the child took her first breath, a new life born into the legacy of strength and survival. Emily held her daughter close, tears mingling with sweat as she whispered the name she had chosen, Elena, a name carried through generations, a bridge between past and future. The cabin, the river, and the forest bore witness to this sacred moment, the culmination of hope, resilience, and love. In the days that followed, Emily and Elena settled into a new rhythm. The cabin, once a refuge from loneliness, now echoed with the soft coos and laughter of a child. Mrs. Harlan visited often, bringing meals and stories of the town, weaving a tapestry of support around mother and daughter. Emily found strength in the presence of her child, a living testament to the endurance she had drawn from the cabin's history. The forest seemed to respond in kind. The wildflowers bloomed brighter, the river's song grew sweeter, and the trees swayed with a gentle grace that felt like a blessing. Visitors came with cautious smiles, bearing gifts and well wishes, their acceptance a quiet affirmation of the journey Emily had undertaken. The town's earlier suspicions gave way to admiration, as neighbors recognized the courage it took to claim a future so fiercely. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the forest floor, Emily sat on the porch, la nena nestled in her arms. The wooden pendant hung around the child's neck, a symbol of the legacy she now carried. Emily traced the delicate features of her daughter, feeling the weight of responsibility and the boundless hope that filled her heart. She thought of Margaret, the woman whose journal had guided her, and of the countless others whose stories were woven into the cabin's walls. Emily knew that her daughter was the next chapter in a lineage of resilience, a living link in a chain forged by love and endurance. The challenges ahead were still real. The world beyond the forest was changing, and the balance between preservation and progress remained delicate. But in this moment, cradling her daughter against the backdrop of the whispering trees and flowing river, Emily felt a profound sense of belonging and purpose. She began to write again, her journal filling with new stories of birth and beginnings, of hope and healing. The cabin's legacy was no longer just history. It was life unfolding in real time, a testament to the enduring power of connection and the strength found in embracing one's roots. As night fell and the forest settled into quiet, Emily whispered a promise to Nena, a vow to protect the cabin, the land, and the stories that had shaped them both. With her daughter by her side, she faced the future with a heart full of courage and an unshakable bond to the past. The river continued its steady journey, the stars above shining like ancient guardians, and the cabin stood steadfast, a beacon of hope, resilience, and new life. Together, Emily and Nena stepped into the unfolding story, ready to write the next chapter in the legacy of the Silver River. The morning sun filtered softly through the canopy of leaves, casting a warm glow over the cabin nestled beside the Silver River. Emily sat at the worn wooden table, her fingers tracing the embossed cover of a leather-bound journal. The quiet stillness of the early hour was a stark contrast to the whirlwind of months past. Legal battles, community rallies, the birth of her daughter, and the slow, steady healing of both land and spirit. She opened the journal, the pages filled with careful script, her own words interwoven with those of Margaret and the other women whose stories had become part of her life. Emily's handwriting curved gracefully across the paper, telling a story not just of survival, but of renewal, hope, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Nena slept peacefully in the cradle nearby, her soft breaths rising and falling like the gentle rhythm of the river outside. The cabin, once a refuge from loneliness and fear, had transformed into a home, a place where past and present coexisted in harmony, and where the future stretched out like the winding river, full of promise. Emily paused to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The cabin's legacy was no longer just a whispered secret or a forgotten shelter. It was a living testament to the resilience of women who had faced adversity with quiet strength. She felt the weight of that legacy, not as a burden, but as a gift entrusted to her care. Outside, the town of Greybridge began to stir, its streets slowly waking to the rhythms of a new day. The battles to protect the cabin had forged unexpected connections, turning isolation into community. Neighbors who had once looked away now greeted Emily with warmth and respect, their shared history a bridge to understanding. Mr. Harrington's steady presence had been a guiding light through the legal storms, ensuring that the cabin's protections would endure. Together with the town council, they had established the Blackwood Heritage Trust, a local organization dedicated to preserving the cabin, the surrounding forest, and the stories woven into their roots. Emily's thoughts turned to the future she hoped to build for Nena, a life grounded in the wisdom of the past and open to the possibilities ahead. She imagined teaching her daughter to listen to the river's song, to walk the forest trails with reverence, and to carry forward the strength of the women who had come before. The cabin's walls held new memories now. The laughter of a child, the soft murmur of lullabies, the quiet moments of reflection that marked each day. Emily found solace in the simple routines of motherhood and caretaking, the rhythm of life unfolding gently but surely. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, Emily sat on the porch with Elena nestled in her arms. The wooden pendant Margaret had left hung around the child's neck, a symbol of the lineage she now embodied. Birds sang from the treetops, and the river shimmered like a ribbon of light. Emily began to write in her journal, her pen flowing with ease as she recorded the day's moments. The soft touch of her daughter's hand, the scent of wildflowers carried on the breeze, and the profound gratitude that filled her heart. Each word was a thread in the tapestry of their shared story, a narrative of resilience, love, and belonging. As twilight deepened and the first stars emerged, Emily closed the journal and looked out across the river. The cabin stood steadfast, a beacon of enduring strength amid the ever-changing world. She felt a deep peace settle within her, a knowing that this place and the legacy it held would continue to nurture generations yet to come. With Elena by her side, Emily embraced the quiet power of the moment. The future was unwritten, a path stretching forward through the forest and beyond. But whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready. Rooted in the past, grounded in the present, and filled with hope for the days to come. In the heart of the woods, beside the Silver River, the Blackwood legacy lived on, a story of women who dared to hope, to heal, and to protect the land and each other. And as Emily whispered a gentle lullaby to her daughter, she knew that their story was only beginning.